Hello everyone, welcome back. And today we are reading Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. So without further ado, let's begin. Takezo lay among the corpses. There were thousands of them. The whole world has gone crazy, he thought dimly. A man might as well be a dead leaf floating in the autumn breeze. He himself looked like one of the lifeless bodies surrounding him. He tried to raise his head, but could only lift it a few inches from the ground. He couldn't remember ever feeling so weak. How long have I been here? He wondered. Flies came buzzing around his head. He wanted to brush them away, but couldn't even master the energy to raise his arm. It was stiff, almost brittle, like the rest of his body. I must have been out for a while, he thought, wiggling one finger at a time. Little did he know he was wounded, with 2 bullets lodged firmly in his thigh. Low, dark clouds shifted ominously across the sky. The night before, sometime between midnight and dawn, a blinding rain had drenched the plain of Sekigahara. It was now past noon on the 15th of the ninth month of 1600. Although the typhoon had passed, now and then fresh torrents of rain would fall on the corpses and onto Takezo's upturned face. Each time it came, he would open and close his mouth like a fish, trying to drink in the droplets. It's like the water they wipe a dying man's lips with, he reflected, savoring each bit of moisture. His head was numb, his thoughts the fleeting shadows of delirium. His sight had lost, he knew that much. Kobayakawa Hideaki, supposedly an ally, had been secretly in league with the Eastern Army, and when he turned on Ishida Mitsunari's troops at twilight, the tide of battle turned too. He then attacked the armies of other commanders, Ukida, Shimazu, and Konishi, and the collapse of the Western Army was complete. In only half a day's fighting, the question of who would henceforth rule the country was settled. It was Tokugawa Ieyasu, the powerful Edo daimyo. Images of his sister and the old villagers floated before his eyes. I'm dying, he thought, without a tinge of sadness. Is this what it's really like? He felt drawn to the peace of death, like a child mesmerized by a flame. Suddenly, one of the nearby corpses raised its head. Takezo. The images of his mind ceased. As if awakened from the dead, he turned his head toward the sound. The voice, he was sure, was that of his best friend. With all his strength, he raised himself slightly, squeezing out a whisper barely audible above the pelting rain. Matahachi, is that you? Then he collapsed, lay still and listened. Takezo, are you really alive? Yes, alive, he shouted in a sudden outburst of bravado. And you? You better not die either, don't you dare. His eyes were wide open now, and a smile played faintly about his lips. Not me, no, sir, gasping for breath, crawling on his elbows and dragging his legs stiffly behind him, Matahachi inched his way toward his friend. He made a grab for Takezo's hand, but only caught his small finger with his own. As childhood friends, they had often sealed promises with this gesture. He came closer and gripped the whole hand. I can't believe you are all right, too. We must be the only survivors. Don't speak too soon. I haven't tried to get up yet. I'll help you. Let's get out of here. Suddenly, Takezo pulled Matahachi to the ground and growled, "Play dead, more trouble coming." The ground began to rumble like a cauldron. Peeking through their arms, they watched the approaching whirlwind close in on them. Then they were nearer, lines of jet-black horsemen hurtling directly toward them. "The bastards, they are back!" exclaimed Matahachi, raising his knee as if preparing for a sprint. Takezo seized his ankle, nearly breaking it, and yanked him to the ground. In a moment, the horses were flying past them, hundreds of muddy, lethal hooves galloping in formation, riding roughshod over the fallen samurai. Battle cries on their lips, their armor and weapons clinking and clanking. The riders came on and on. Matahachi lay on his stomach, eyes closed, hoping against hope they would not be trampled. But Takezo stared unblinkingly upward. The horses passed so close they could smell their sweat. Then it was over. Miraculously, they were uninjured and undetected, and for several minutes both remained silent in disbelief. "Saved again!" exclaimed Takezo, reaching his hand out to Matahachi. Still hugging the ground, Matahachi slowly turned his head to show a broad, slightly trembling grin. "Somebody's on our side, that's for sure," he said huskily. The two friends helped each other, with great difficulty, to their feet. Slowly, they made their way across the battlefield to the safety of the wooded hills, hobbling along with arms around each other's shoulders. There they collapsed, but after a rest began foraging for food. For 2 days they subsisted on wild chestnuts and edible leaves in the sodden hollows of Mount Ibuki. This kept them from starving, but Takezo's stomach ached and Matahachi's bowels tormented him. No food could fill him, no drink quench his thirst, but even he felt his strength returning bit by bit. The storm on the 15th marked the end of the fall typhoons. Now, only 2 nights later, a cold white moon glared grimly down from a cloudless sky. They both knew how dangerous it was to be on the road in the glaring moonlight, their shadows looming like silhouette targets in clear view of any patrols searching for stragglers. The decision to risk it had been Takezo's, with Matahachi in such misery, saying he'd rather be captured than continue trying to walk. There really didn't seem to be much choice. They had to move on, but it was also clear that they had to find a place to lie low and rest. They made their way slowly in what they thought was the direction of the small town of Tarui. "Can you make it?" Takezo asked repeatedly. He held his friend's arm around his own shoulder to help him along. "Are you alright?" It was the labored breathing that worried him. "You want to rest?" "I'm alright." Matahachi tried to sound brave, but his face was paler than the moon above them. Even with his lens for a walking stick, he could barely put one foot in front of the other. He had been apologizing abjectly over and over. I'm sorry, Takezo. I know it's me who is slowing us down. I'm really sorry. The first few times Takezo had simply brushed this off with forget it. Eventually, when they stopped to rest, he turned to his friend and burst out. Look, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I'm the one who got you into this in the first place, remember? Remember how I told you my plan, how I was finally going to do something that would really have impressed my father? I've never been able to stand the fact that to his dying day, he was sure I would never amount to anything. I was going to show him. Ha! Takezo's father, Munisai, had once served under Lord Shimon of Iga. As soon as Takezo heard that Ishida Mitsunari was raising an army, he was convinced that the chance of a lifetime had finally arrived. His father had been a samurai. Wasn't it only natural that he would be made one too? He ached to enter the fray, to prove his mettle, to have word spread like wildfire through the village that he had decapitated an enemy general. He had wanted desperately to prove he was somebody to be reckoned with, to be respected, not just the village troublemaker. Takezo reminded Matahachi of all this, and Matahachi nodded. I know, but I felt the same way. It wasn't just you. Takezo went on. I wanted you to come with me because we've always done everything together. But didn't your mother carry on something awful, yelling and telling everybody I was crazy and no good? And your fiancé Otsu, and my sister and everybody else crying and saying village boys should stay in the village. Oh, maybe they had their reasons. We are both only sons, and if we get ourselves killed, there's no one else to carry on the family names. But who cares? Is that any way to live? They had slipped out of the village and noticed and were convinced that no farther barrier lay between themselves and the honors of battle. When they reached the Shimen encampment, however, they came face to face with the realities of war. They were told straight away they would not be made samurai, not overnight, nor even in a few weeks, no matter who their fathers had been. To Ishida and the other generals, Takezo and Matahachi were a pair of country bumpkins, little more than children who happened to have got their hands on a couple of lances. The best they could wangle was to be allowed to stay on as common foot soldiers. Their responsibilities, if they could be called that, consisted of carrying weapons, rice kettles, and other utensils, cutting grass, walking on the road gangs, and occasionally going out as scouts. Samurai, ha, said Takezo. What a joke generals had. I didn't even get near an enemy samurai, let alone a general. Well, at least it's all over. Now what are we going to do? I can't leave you here all alone. If I did, I could never face your mother or Otsu again. Takezo, I don't blame you for the mess we are in. It wasn't your fault we lost. If anybody is to blame, it's that two-faced Kobayakawa. I really like to get my hands on him. I would kill the son of a bitch. A couple of hours later, they were standing on the edge of a small plain, gazing out over a sea of reed like miscanthus. battered and broken by the storm. No houses, no lights. There were lots of corpses here too, lying just as they had fallen. The head of one rested in some tall grass. Another was on its back in a small stream. Still another was entangled grotesquely with a dead horse. The rain had washed the blood away, and in the moonlight the dead flesh looked like fish scales. All around them was the lonely autumn litany of bell rings and crickets. A stream of tears cleared a white path down Matahachi's grimy face. He heaved the sigh of a very sick man. Takezo, if I die, will you take care of Otsu? What are you talking about? I feel like I'm dying. Takezo snapped. Well, if that's the way you feel, you probably will. He was exasperated, wishing his friend were stronger so he could lean on him once in a while, not physically, but for encouragement. Come on, Matahachi, don't be such a crying baby. My mother has people to look after her, but Otsu is all alone in the world. Always has been. I feel so sorry for her, Takezo. Promise you'll take care of her if I'm not around. Get hold of yourself. People don't die from diarrhea. Sooner or later, we are going to find a house, and when we do, I'll put you to bed and get some medicine for you. Now stop all this blabbering about dying. A little farther on, they came to a place where the piles of lifeless bodies made it look as if a whole division had been wiped out. By this time, they were careless to the sight of gore. Their glazed eyes took in the scene with cold indifference, and they stopped to rest again. While they were catching their breath, they heard something move among the corpses. Both of them shrank back in fright, instinctively crouching down with their eyes peeled and senses alerted. The figure made a quick darting movement like that of a surprised rabbit. As their eyes focused, they saw that whoever it was squatting close to the ground. Thinking at first it was a stray samurai, they braced themselves for a dangerous encounter, but to their amazement, the fierce warrior turned out to be a young girl. She seemed to be about 13 or 14 and wore a kimono with rounded sleeves. The narrow obi around her waist, though patched in places, was of gold brocade. There among the corpses, she presented a bizarre sight indeed. She looked over and stared at them suspiciously with shrewd cat-like eyes. Takezo and Matahachi were both wondering the same thing. What on earth could bring a young girl to a ghost-ridden, corpse-strewn field in the dead of night? For a time, they both simply stared back at her. Then Takezo said, "Who are you?" She blinked a couple of times, got to her feet and speed away. "Stop!" shouted Takezo. "I just want to ask you a question. Don't go." But gone she was, like a flash of lightning in the night. The sound of a small bell receded eerily into the darkness. Could it have been a ghost? Takezo mused aloud as he stared vacantly into the thin mist. Matahachi shivered and forced a laugh. "If there were any ghosts around here, I think they would be those of soldiers, don't you?" "I wish I hadn't scared her away," said Takezo. "There has got to be a village around here somewhere. She could have given us directions." They went on and climbed the nearer of the two hills ahead of them. In the hollow on the other side was the marsh that stretched south from Mount Fuwa, and a light only half a mile away. When they approached the farmhouse, they got the impression that it wasn't of the run-of-the-mill variety. For one thing, it was surrounded by a thick dirt wall. For another, its gate verged on being grandiose, or at least the remains of the gate, for it was old and badly in need of repair. Takezo went up to the door and rapped lightly. Is anybody home? Getting no answer, he tried again. Sorry to bother you at this hour, but my friend here is sick. We don't want to cause any trouble. He just needs some rest. They heard whispering inside, and presently the sound of someone coming to the door. You are stragglers from Sekigahara, aren't you? The voice belonged to a young girl. That's right, said Takezo. We were under Lord Shimon of Iga. Go away. If you are found around here, we'll be in trouble. Look, we are very sorry to bother you like this, but we've been walking a long time. My friend needs some rest, that's all, and please go away. Alright, if you really want us to, but couldn't you give my friend some medicine? His stomach is in such bad shape, it's hard for us to keep moving. Well, I don't know. After a moment or two, they heard footsteps and a little tinkling sound receding into the house, growing fainter and fainter. Just then they noticed the face. It was in a side window, a woman's face, and it had been watching them all along. Akemi, she called out, let them in. They are foot soldiers. The Tokugawa patrols aren't going to be wasting time on them. They are nobodies. Akemi opened the door and the woman who introduced herself as Oko came and listened to Takezo's story. It was agreed that they could have the woodshed to sleep in. To quiet his bowels, Matahachi was given magnolia charcoal powder and thin rice gruel with scallions in it. Over the next few days, he slept almost without interruption, while Takezo, sitting vigil by his side, used cheap spirits to treat the bullet wounds in his thigh. One evening, about a week later, Takezo and Matahachi sat chatting. They must have a trade of some kind, Takezo remarked. I couldn't care less what they do. I'm just glad they took us in. But Takezo's curiosity was aroused. The mother is not so old, he went on. It's strange, the two of them living alone here in the mountains. Don't you think the girl looks a little like Otsu? There is something about her that puts me in mind of Otsu, but I don't think they really look alike. They are both nice looking, that's about it. What do you suppose she was doing the first time we saw her? Creeping around all those corpses in the middle of the night? It didn't seem to bother her at all. I can still see it. Her face was as calm and serene as those dolls they made in Kyoto. What a picture. Matahachi motioned for him to be quiet. Shh, I hear her bell. Akemi's light knock on the door sounded like the tapping of a woodpecker. Matahachi, Takezo, she called softly. Yes, it's me. Takezo got up and undid the lock. She came in carrying a tray of medicine and food and asked them how they were. Much better, thanks to you and your mother. Mother said that even if you feel better, you shouldn't talk too loud or go outside. Takezo spoke for the two of them. We are really sorry to put you to so much trouble. Oh, that's okay. You just have to be careful. Ishida Mitsunari and some of the other generals haven't been caught yet. They are keeping a close watch on this area and the roads are crawling with Tokugawa troops. They are? So, even though you are only foot soldiers, Mother said that if we are caught hiding you, we'll be arrested. We won't make a sound, Takezo promised. I will even cover Matahachi's face with a rag if he snores too loudly. Akemi smiled, turned to go and said, Good night, I'll see you in the morning. Wait, said Matahachi. Why don't you hang around and talk a while? I can't. Why not? Mother would be angry. Why worry about her? How old are you? 16. Small for your age, aren't you? Thanks for telling me. Where's your father? I don't have one anymore. Sorry, then how do you live? We make moxa. Moxa? That medicine you burn on your skin to get rid of the pain, get rid of pain. Yes, the moxa from hereabouts is famous. In spring we cut mugwort on Mount Ibuki. In summer we dry it, and in fall and winter make it into moxa. We sell it in Tarui. People come from all over just to buy it. I guess you don't need a man around to do that. Well, if that's all you wanted to know, I better be going. Hold on just another second, said Takezo. I have one more question. Well, the other night, the night we came here, we saw a girl out on the battlefield and she looked just like you. That was you, wasn't it? Akemi turned quickly and opened the door. What were you doing out there? She slammed the door behind her, and as she ran to the house, the little bell rang out in a strange, erratic rhythm. The comb. At 5 feet 8 or 9, Takezo was tall for people of his time. His body was like a fine steed's, strong and supple, with long, sinewy limbs. His lips were full and crimson, and his thick black eyebrows fell short of being bushy by virtue of their fine shape. Extending well beyond the outer corners of his eyes, they served to accentuate his manliness. The villagers call him the child of a fat year, an expression used only about children whose features were larger than average. Far from an insult, the nickname nonetheless set him apart from the other youngsters, and for this reason caused him considerable embarrassment in his early years. Although it was never used in reference to Matahachi, the same expression could have been applied to him as well. Somewhat shorter and stockier than Takezo, he was barrel-chested and round-faced, giving an impression of joviality, if not downright buffoonery. His prominent, slightly protruding eyes were given to shifting when he talked, and most jokes made at his expense hinged on his resemblance to the frogs that croak unceasingly through the summer nights. Both youths were at the height of their growing years, and thus quick to recover from most ailments. By the time Takezo's wounds had completely healed, Matahachi could no longer stand his incarceration. He took to pacing the woodshed and complaining endlessly about being cooped up. More than once he made the mistake of saying he felt like a cricket in a damp, dark hole, leaving himself wide open to Takezo's retort that frogs and crickets are supposed to like such living arrangements. At some point, Matahachi must have began peeping into the house, because one day he leaned over to his cellmate as if to impart some earth-shattering news. Every evening, he whispered gravely, the widow puts powder on her face and pretties herself up. Takezo's face became that of a girl-hating 12-year-old detecting defection, a budding interest in them in his closest friend. Matahachi had turned traitor, and the look was one of unmistakable disgust. Matahachi began going to the house and sitting by the hearth with Akemi and her youthful mother. After 3 or 4 days of chatting and joking with them, the convivial guest became one of the family. He stopped going back to the woodshed even at night, and the rare times he did, he had sake on his breath and tried to entice Takezo into the house by singing the praises of the good life just a few feet away. You are crazy, Takezo would reply in exasperation. You are going to get us killed, or at least picked up. We lost, we are stragglers. Can't you get that through your head? We have to be careful and lie low until things cool down. He soon grew tired of trying to reason with his pleasure-loving friend, however, and started instead to cut him short with curt replies. I don't like sake, or sometimes I like it out here, it's cozy, But Takezo was going stir crazy too. He was bored beyond endurance and eventually showed signs of weakening. Is it really safe? He would ask. This neighborhood, I mean, no sign of patrols, you are sure? After being entombed for 20 days in the woodshed, he finally emerged like a half-starved prisoner of war. His skin had the translucent, waxen look of death, all the more apparent as he stood beside his sun and sake-reddened friend. He squinted up at the clear blue sky and stretching his arms broadly, yawned extravagantly. When his cavernous mouth finally came close, one noticed that his brows had been knit all the while. His face wore a troubled air. Matahachi, he said seriously, we are imposing on these people. They are taking a big risk having us around. I think we should start for home. I guess you are right, said Matahachi, but they are not letting anyone through the barriers and check. The roads to Ise and Kyoto are both impossible, according to the widow. She says we should stay put until the snow comes. The girl says too, she is convinced we should stay hidden and you know she is out and about every day. You call sitting by the fire drinking being hidden? Sure, you know what I did? The other day, some of Tokugawa's men, they are still looking for General Ukita, came snooping around. I got rid of the bastard just by going out and greeting them. At this point, as Takezo's eyes widened in disbelief, Matahachi let out a rolling belly laugh. When it subsided, he went on, you are safer out in the open than you are crouching in the woodshed listening for footsteps and going crazy. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Matahachi doubled up with laughter again and Takezo shrugged. Maybe you are right, that could be the best way to handle things. He still had his reservations, but after this conversation, he moved into the house. Oko, who obviously liked having people, more specifically men around, made them feel completely at home. Occasionally, however, she gave them a jolt by suggesting that one of them marry Akemi. This seemed to fluster Matahachi more than Takezo, who simply ignored the suggestion or countered it with a humorous remark. It was the season for the succulent, fragrant Matsutake, which grows at the bases of pine trees, and Takezo relaxed enough to go hunting the large mushrooms on the wooded mountain just behind the house. Akemi, basket in hand, would search from tree to tree. Each time she picked up their scent, her innocent voice reverberated through the woods. Takezo, over here, lots of them. Hunting around nearby, he invariably replied, there are plenty over here too. Through the pine branches, the autumn sun filtered down on them in thin, slanting shafts. The carpet of pine needles in the cool shelter of the trees was a soft, dusky rose. When they tired, Akemi would challenge him, giggling, let's see who has the most. I do, he would always reply smugly, at which point she would begin inspecting his basket. This day was no different from the others. Ha ha, I knew it, she cried, gleefully triumphant the way only girls that young can be. With no hint of self-consciousness or affected modesty, she bent over his basket. You've got a bunch of toadstools in your batch. Then she discarded the poisonous fungi one by one, not actually counting out loud, but with movements so slow and deliberate Takezo could hardly ignore them, even with his eyes closed. She flung each one as far as she could. Her task completed, she looked up, her young face beaming with self-satisfaction. Now look how many more I have than you. It's getting late, Takezo muttered. Let's go home. You are cross because you lost, aren't you? She started racing down the mountainside like a peasant, but suddenly stopped dead in her tracks, an expression of alarm clouding her face. Approaching diagonally across the grove, halfway down the slope was a mountain of a man. His strides were long and languorous, and his glaring eyes were trained directly on the frail young girl before him. He looked frighteningly primitive. Everything about him smacked of the struggle to survive, and he had a distinct air of bellicosity, ferocious bushy eyebrows, and a thick, curling upper lip, a heavy sword, a cloak of mail, and an animal skin wrapped around him. Akemi, he roared, and as he came closer to her, he grinned broadly, showing a row of yellow, decaying teeth. But Akemi's face continued to register nothing but horror. Is that wonderful mama of yours home? He asked with labored sarcasm. Yes, came a peep of a reply. Well, when you go home, I want you to tell her something. Would you do that for me? He spoke mock politely. Yes, his tone became harsh. You tell her she's not putting anything over on me, trying to make money behind my back. You tell her I'll be around soon for my cut. Have you got that? Akemi said nothing. She probably thinks I don't know about it, but the guy she sold the goods to came straight to me. I bet you were going to Sekigahara too, weren't you, little one? No, of course not, she protested weakly. Well, never mind, just tell her what I said. If she pulls any more fast ones, I'll kick her out of the neighborhood. He glared at the girl for a moment, then lumbered off in the direction of the marsh. Takezo turned his eyes from the departing stranger and looked at Akemi with concern. Who on earth was that? Akemi, her lips still trembling, answered wearily. His name is Tsujikaze. He comes from the village of Fuwa. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He's a freebooter, isn't he? Yes. What's he so worked up about? She stood there without answering. I won't tell anybody, he assured her. Can't you even tell me? Akemi, obviously miserable, seemed to be searching for words. Suddenly, she leaned against Takezo's chest and pleaded, Promise you won't tell anyone? Who am I going to tell? The Tokugawa samurai? Remember the night you first saw me at Sekigahara? Of course I remember. Well, haven't you figured out yet what I was doing? No, I haven't thought about it, he said with a straight face. Well, I was stealing. She looked at him closely, gauging his reaction. Stealing? After a battle, I go to the battlefield and take things off the dead soldiers. Swords, scabbard ornaments, incense bags, anything we can sell. She looked at him again for a sign of disapproval, but his face betrayed none. It scares me, she sighed, then turning pragmatic. But we need the money for food, and if I say I don't want to go, Mother gets furious. The sun was still fairly high in the sky. At Akemi's suggestion, Takezo sat down on the grass. Through the pines, they could look down on the house in the marsh. Takezo nodded to himself as if figuring something out. A bit later, he said, then that story about catching magwort in the mountains, making it into moxer, that was all a lie. Oh no, we do that too, but Mother has such expensive tastes. We would never be able to make a living on moxer. When my father was alive, we lived in the biggest house in the village, in all 7 villages of Ibuki. As a matter of fact, we had lots of servants, and Mother always had beautiful things. Was your father a merchant? Oh no, he was the leader of the local freebooters. Akemi's eyes shone with pride. It was clear she no longer feared Takezo's reaction and was giving vent to her true feelings, her jaw set, her small hands tightening into fists as she spoke. This Tsujikaze Tamer, the man we just met, killed him. At least everyone says he did. You mean your father was murdered? Nodding silently, she began in spite of herself to weep, and Takezo felt something deep inside himself start to thaw. He hadn't felt much sympathy for the girl at first. Though smaller than most other girls of 16, she talked like a grown woman much of the time, and every once in a while made a quick movement that put one on guard. But when the tears began to drop from her long eyelashes, she suddenly melted with pity. He wanted to hug her in his arms to protect her. All the same, she was not a girl who had had anything resembling a proper upbringing. That there was no nobler calling than that of her father seemed to be something she never questioned. Her mother had persuaded her that it was quite all right to strip corpses, not in order to eat but in order to live nicely. Many out-and-out thieves would have shrank from the task. During the long years of feudal strife, it had reached the point where all the shiftless good-for-nothings in the countryside drifted into making their living this way. People had more or less come to expect it of them. When war broke out, the local military rulers even made use of their services, rewarding them generously for setting fire to enemy supplies, spreading false rumors, stealing houses from enemy camps, stealing horses from enemy camps, and the like. Most of their services were bought, but even when they were not, a war offered a host of opportunities. Besides foraging among corpses for valuables, they could sometimes even wangle rewards for slaying samurai whose heads they had merely stumbled upon and picked up. One large battle made it possible for these unscrupulous pilferers to live comfortably for 6 months or a year. During the most turbulent times, even the ordinary farmer and woodcutter had learned to profit from human misery and bloodshed. The fighting on the outskirts of their village might keep these simple souls from walking, but they had ingeniously adapted to the situation and discovered how to pick over the remains of human life like vultures. Partly because of these intrusions, the professional looters maintained strict surveillance over their respective territories. It was an ironclad rule that poachers, namely brigands who trespassed on the more powerful brigands' turf, could not go unpunished. Those who dare infringe on the assumed rights of these thugs were liable to cruel retribution. Akemi shivered and said, "What will we do? Tamer's henchmen are on their way here, I just know it." "Don't worry," Takezo reassured her. "If they do show up, I will greet them personally." When they came down from the mountain, twilight had descended on the marsh, and all was still. A smoke trail from the bath fire at the house crept along the top of a row of tall rushes like an airborne undulating snake. Oko, having finished applying her nightly makeup, was standing idly at the back door. When she saw her daughter approaching side by side with Takezo, she shouted, "Akemi, what have you been doing out so late?" There was sternness in her eye and voice. The girl who had been walking along absent-mindedly was brought up short. She was more sensitive to her mother's moods than to anything else in the world. Her mother had both nurtured this sensitivity and learned to exploit it, to manipulate her daughter like a puppet with a mere look or gesture. Akemi quickly fled Takezo's side and, blushing noticeably, ran ahead and into the house. The next day, Akemi told her mother about Tsujikaze Tamer. Oko flew into a rage. Why didn't you tell me immediately? She screamed, rushing around like a mad woman, tearing at her hair, taking things out of drawers and closets and piling them all together in the middle of the room. Matahachi, Takezo, give me a hand. We have to hide everything. Matahachi shifted a board pointed to by Oko and hoisted himself up above the ceiling. There wasn't much space between the ceiling and the rafters. One could barely crawl about, but it served Oko's purpose, and most likely that of her departed husband. Takezo, standing on a stool between mother and daughter, began handing things up to Matahachi one by one. If Takezo hadn't heard Akemi's story the day before, he would have been amazed at the variety of articles he now saw. Takezo knew the two of them had been at this for a long time, but even so, it was astonishing how much they had accumulated. There was a dagger, a spear tassel, a sleeve from a suit of armor, a helmet without a crown, a miniature portable shrine, a Buddhist rosary, a banner staff. There was even a lacquer saddle, beautifully curved and ornately decorated with gold, silver, and mother-of-pearl inlay. From the opening in the ceiling, Matahachi peered out, a perplexed look on his face. Is that everything? No, there's one more thing, said Oko, rushing off. In a moment she was back, bearing a 4-foot sword of black oak. Takezo started passing it up to Matahachi's outstretched arms, but the weight, the curve, the perfect balance of the weapon impressed him so deeply that he could not let it go. He turned to Oko, a sheepish look on his face. Do you think I could have this? He asked, his eyes showing a new vulnerability. He glanced at his feet, as if to say he knew he had done nothing to deserve the sword. Do you really want it? She said softly, a motherly tone in her voice. Yes, yes, I really do. Although she didn't actually say he could have it, she smiled, showing a dimple, and Takezo knew the sword was his. Matahachi jumped down from the ceiling, bursting with envy. He fingered the sword covetously, making Oko laugh. See how the little man pouts because he didn't get a present. She tried to placate him by giving him a handsome leather purse beaded with agate. Matahachi didn't look very happy with it. His eyes kept shifting to the black oak sword. His feelings were hurt, and the purse did little to assuage his wounded pride. When her husband was alive, Oko had apparently acquired the habit of taking a leisurely steaming hot bath every evening, putting on her makeup and then drinking a bit of sake. In short, he spent the same amount of time on her toilet as the highest paid geisha. It was not the sort of luxury that ordinary people could afford, but she insisted on it and had even taught Akemi to follow the same routine, although the girl found it boring and the reasons for it unfathomable. Not only did Oko like to live well, she was determined to remain young forever. That evening, as they sat around the recessed floor hearth, Oko poured Matahachi sake and tried to persuade Takezo to have some as well. When he refused, she put the cup in his hand, seized him by the wrist, and forced him to raise it to his lips. Men are supposed to be able to drink, she chided. If you can't do it alone, I will help. From time to time, Matahachi stared uneasily at her. Oko, conscious of his gaze, became even more familiar with Takezo. Placing her hand playfully on his knee, she began humming a popular love song. By this time, Matahachi had had enough. Suddenly turning to Takezo, he blurted out, We ought to be moving on soon. This had the desired effect. But where would you go? Oko stammered. Back to Miyamoto. My mother is there, and so is my fiancé. Momentarily taken by surprise, Oko swiftly regained her composure. Her eyes narrowed to slits, her smile froze, her voice turned exit. Well, please accept my apologies for delaying you, for taking you in and giving you a home. If there's a girl waiting for you, you better hurry on back. Far be it from me to keep you. After receiving the black oak sword, Takezo was never without it. He derived an indescribable pleasure from simply holding it. Often he would squeeze the handle tightly or ran its blunt edge along his palm just to feel the perfect proportion of the curve to the length. When he slept, he hugged it to his body. The cool touch of the wooden surface against his cheek reminded him of the floor of the dojo where he had practiced sword techniques in winter. This nearly perfect instrument of both art and death reawakened in him the fighting spirit he had inherited from his father. Takezo had loved his mother, but she had left his father and moved away when he was still small, leaving him alone with Munisai, a mertenant who wouldn't have known how to spoil a child in the unlikely event that he had wanted to. In his father's presence, the boy had always felt awkward and frightened, never really at ease. When he was 9 years old, he had so craved a kind word from his mother that he had run away from home and gone all the way to Harima province, where she was living. Takezo never learned why his mother and father had separated, and at that age, an explanation might not have helped much. She had married another samurai by whom she had one more child. On the little runaway once the little runaway had reached Harima, he wasted no time in locating his mother. On that occasion, she took him to a wooded area behind the local shrine so that they wouldn't be seen, and there, with tear-filled eyes, hugged him tightly and tried to explain why he had to go back to his father. Takezo never forgot the scene. Every detail of it remained vividly in his mind as long as he lived. Of course, Munisai, being the samurai he was, had sent people to retrieve his son the moment he learned of his disappearance. It was obvious where the child had gone. Takezo was returned to Miyamoto like a bundle of firewood, strapped on the back of an unsaddled horse. Munisai, by way of greeting, had called him an insolent brat and in a state of rage, verging on hysteria, caned him until he could cane no more. Takezo remembered more explicitly than anything else the venom with which his father had spat out his ultimatum: "If you go to your mother one more time, I will disown you." Not long after this incident, Takezo learned that his mother had fallen ill and died. Her death had the effect of transforming him from a quiet, gloomy child into the village bully. Even Munisai was intimidated eventually. When he took a truncheon to the boy, the latter countered with a wooden staff. The only one who ever stood up to him was Masahachi, also the son of a samurai. The other children all did Takezo's bidding. By the time he was 12 or 13, he was almost as tall as an adult. One year, a wandering swordsman named Arima Kihei put up a gold emblazoned banner and offered to take on challengers from the village. Takezo killed him effortlessly, eliciting praise for his valor from the villagers. Their high opinion of him, however, was short-lived, since as he grew older, he became increasingly unmanageable and brutal. Many thought him sadistic, and soon, whenever he appeared on the scene, people gave him a very wide berth. His attitude toward them grew to reflect their coldness. When his father, as harsh and unrelenting as ever, finally died, the cruel streak in Takezo widened even more. If it had not been for his older sister, Ogin, Takezo would probably have gotten himself into something far over his head and been driven out of the village by an angry mob. Fortunately, he left his sister, and powerless before her tears, usually did whatever she asked. Going off to war with Matahachi was a turning point for Takezo. It indicated that somehow he wanted to take his place in society alongside other men. The defeat at Sekigahara had abruptly curtailed such hopes, and he found himself once again plunged into the dark reality from which he thought he had escaped. Still, he was a young, blessed with the sublime lightheartedness that flourishes only in an age of strife. When he slept, his face became as placid as an infant's, completely untroubled by thoughts of the morrow. He had his share of dreams, asleep or awake, but he suffered few real disappointments. Having so little to begin with, he had little to lose, and although he was in a sense uprooted, he was also unfettered by shackles. Breathing deeply and steadily, holding on to his wooden sword tightly, Takezo at this moment may well have been dreaming, a faint smile on his lips as visions of his gentle sister and his peaceful hometown cascaded like a mountain waterfall before his closed, heavily lashed eyes. Oko, carrying a lamp, slipped into his room. What a peaceful face, she marveled under her breath. She reached out and lightly touched his lips with her fingers. Then she blew out the lamp and lay down beside him, curling up cat-like. She inched closer and closer to his body, her whitened face and colorful nightgown really too youthful for her, hidden by the darkness. The only sound that could be heard was that of dewdrops dripping onto the windowsill. I wonder if he's still a virgin, she mused as she reached out to remove his wooden sword. The instant she touched it, Takezo was on his feet and shouting, "Thief, thief!" Oko was thrown over onto the lamp, which cut into her shoulder and chest. Takezo was wrenching her arm without mercy. She screamed out in pain. Astonished, he released her. "Oh, it's you. I thought it was a thief." "Ooh," moaned Oko, "that hurt. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you. You don't know your own strength. You almost tore my arm off. I said I was sorry. What are you doing here anyway?" Ignoring his innocent query, she quickly recovered from her arm injury and tried to coil the same limb around his neck, cooing, "You don't have to apologize, Takezo." She ran the back of her hand softly against his cheek. "Hey, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" he shouted, shrinking away from her touch. "Don't make so much noise, you idiot. You know how I feel about you," she went on, trying to fondle him, with him sweating at her like a man attacked by a swarm of bees. "Yes, I'm very grateful. Neither of us will ever forget how kind you have been, taking us in and all. I don't mean that, Takezo. I'm talking about my woman's feelings, the lovely warm feelings I had for you." Wait a minute, he said, jumping up. I'll light the lamp. Oh, how can you be so cruel, she whimpered, moving to embrace him again. Don't do that, he cried indignantly. Stop it, I mean it. Something in his voice, something intense and resolute, frightened Oko into halting her attack. Takezo felt his bones wobbling, his teeth rattling. Never had he encountered such a formidable adversary, not even when he had looked up at the horses galloping past him at Sekigahara had his heart palpitated so. He sat cringing in the corner of the room.